And I think that leads us very nicely into our next panel, AI in MedEd. Panel 3 is going to be about preparing clinicians for an AI-enabled future. And now I'm just curious, right? Show of hands, how many of you think in the near future there are going to be less provider roles? Raise your hands. Interesting, no one. Fewer provider roles, yeah. And who thinks that there will be more roles enabled by AI? Raise your hands. Okay, so most of the room. Okay. Well, the next panel is here to answer all these questions. Gives me great pleasure to invite Dr. Eric Horvitz, Chief Science Officer, Microsoft, Dr. Daniel Ting, Associate Professor, Duke-NUS, and he's also the Chief Digital and Data Officer of Singapore National Eye Center, Dr. Julie Tsu, Staff Physician at VA, Dr. Daniel Yang, VP of AI at Kaiser Permanente, and it'll be moderated by Dr. Roxana, my co-chair, Assistant Professor of Biomedical Data Science and Dermatology, Stanford University. Thank you.
I hope everyone is well fed and ready to go. I like my panels to be spicy, so I really hope there's disagreement, and if there's not, I might disagree with you just to be a devil's advocate, even though they say the devil needs no advocate. So my first question is, do you think clinicians today are prepared for what's coming in the next 3 to 6 months with AI in healthcare? And if not, what is the gap? And I'll start with Eric.
Because we have such slow translation of great research projects and prototypes and demonstrations into clinical practice, I'd say that unfortunately, over the next 3 to 6 months, there's nothing to adapt to quickly.
Okay, fine, you're right. The next 5 to 10 years.
That's a different story, of
All
course.
Right. You are correct.
Right. So on a longer time frame, there's going to be a bunch of change in many areas in many realms, including medicine and including many specialties, and it's already happening. When it comes to the responsibility of the individual physician, I'd say less so. It's more like the milieu they'll be in, how hospital systems, how practices integrate techniques and tools, and how much work and innovation there'll be around making those tools slide easily into workflows and practices, provide the right kind of instrumentation and controls, as well as calibration, for example, confidence levels when a system says something. But in many ways, we're already seeing tools that I would say are largely enhancing ease of use, both on the logistics side and the administrative burden side, as well as in clinical practice. For example, when it comes to decision-making, some of these tools that do triage, that will scan radiology films, for example, for looking for signs of stroke in the ED, to just set up and triage the attention the radiologist needs to give those films, or pulmonary embolism, these kind of time-critical situations. There are other areas where these systems are just helping in the background, like give me a volumetric analysis of what my echocardiogram is seeing. These don't require really deep changes in practice right now. 10 years from now, I think we'll see the nature of what it is that clinicians do in different areas shift, where many things that are maybe straightforward that are done today as part of the practice become automated with some level of trust, earned trust by the AI systems, shifting what it is that the human beings do with their time and effort when they're seeing patients.
Yeah, jump in. This is a jump in.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm skipping you, but I wanted to just build on that comment, which is nothing new that wasn't already discussed on stage today, but really what I'm seeing is, to Eric's point, reminds me when I scanned the health AI landscape of the Henry Ford quote, if you ask people what they want a faster horse. And so by and large, what I see in the health AI space is just faster horses, right? Take existing processes, sprinkle a little bit of Gen AI productivity magic on it, and that's it. AI does not by itself fix broken processes. It doesn't change financial incentives. It just doesn't change how care is delivered in a fundamental way. It just adapts and augments it, which I think is appropriate. And so probably when I think in the next 1 to 3 years, we'll still be in the faster horse phase of AI. But what I thought was really interesting in the last panel from Karen from OpenAI is when you scan of like the healthcare landscape, we fail to realize is that like we are barreling towards a brick wall of rising costs of care to unsustainable levels, access delays for our patients, growing complexity of care for our patients because of an aging demographic. All of those may bubble up just like we heard about ambient scribes. I mean, the tool became available. The burden that clinicians had faced were always there. And so I think there was just this tipping point where the tool plus the problem just created this acceleration of adoption and use that was unlike any other health IT adoption or any other use case since. And so the question is, are we going to face something similar, which is these other bigger issues of health that we're grappling with, changes the appetite, whether it's appetite for risk or desire, because the alternative is just not good enough.
Great. Anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, well, I kind of agree more with what Eric and Daniel first and Daniel second is going to speak. Yeah, I just want to bring us back to 15 years ago. I mean, so for the last 15 years, we saw the evolution from the AI used for numbers, which is the machine learning, the time, and I started with Lily Peng, Dale Webster's, and that was a pixel-based convolutional neural net on retina imaging, and we saw the back then we were looking at pre-trained versus untrained CNN on ImageNet. That was what Feifei has actually put up on ImageNet. And of course, then we talk about visualizations, techniques, and and explainability, right? So how do we actually unravel like the black box? That's the big thing back then. And of course, last 2.5 years, we talk about Chat 3.5, 4, and then many others as well. In addition to that, we also kind of have to consider about the privacy-preserving technology, federated learning, and how do you share data. And now, the data, the privacy is increasing around the world, right? I mean, the sovereignty, we talk about foundation models, and now the different nations is going to come up with their different sovereign foundation models and the domain-specific foundation models. Kurt likes to talk about radiology foundation models. In ophthalmology, we do have one, the foundation models as well. How do you actually start training your next generation clinicians to keep up with the rapid evolution of the technology that we just mentioned about? So I think this is one of the key questions right now, at least from the Singapore standpoint. We are actually trying to prepare the clinicians for to kind of like adopt this technology in a much better way. Yeah.
I want to know what Julie thinks.
Thank you. I actually was really interested in these conversations because I think we have very similar but slightly different perspective at the VA. So I'm coming from a national healthcare system. CPRS was revolutionary when it came out, but that's been a couple decades now, and we're transitioning to Cerner any day now. But I think that so Meilu is important. I think that we're gradually getting on board with AI solutions. I think that having real clinical needs that are addressing things that are practical for clinician workflows is going to be important to help increase adoption. I think we are seeing it. There's a lot of appetite, but I think there are challenges as well. And so I think there was a comment made earlier, which I couldn't agree more, which is Bay Area is this unique hotbed of where I think the next generation clinicians with skills in medicine and skills in informatics are being trained, but the VA is a nationwide network. We have clinicians across different settings, different more rural settings, potentially less connected settings, and how to get this information across our nationwide network is something that we're thinking deeply about, and we're trying to address with events like this.
Awesome. I have to ask because, Daniel, your comment made me wonder, if we're just building faster horses, what is the car? You must know that question was coming if you're going to use that analogy.
Well, I mean, I'm reminded by my team often that the solution is not the the problem is not the absence of a solution. And so I don't know what the car is. I mean, I can tell you what the problems we're grappling with.
Sure.
And probably all of us are grappling with. It's what I mentioned. It's it's a supply and demand mismatch. So demand for healthcare services in the United States continues to go up, driven in large part by an aging population and changing expectations of care, driven by consumerism, right? Millennials, myself included, we want on-demand access to our healthcare. And supply is fixed because we're reliant on highly trained clinicians. And we have a growing shortage of these clinicians. In fact, the federal government estimates we'll have a shortage of 200,000 primary care docs by 2037, which is 12 years from now. And that's 1/3 of all practicing PCPs today. So there's no way we're going to train or hire our way out of that supply and demand mismatch. And so the consequences we're seeing are double-digit rate increases for plans, care delivery systems. The cost of labor continues to go up. We're seeing patients having to wait longer and longer to see their providers. And we're seeing providers increasingly feeling burnt out because we're asking them to see more patients and more complex patients with the same number of hours each day. I mean, so to me, those are the roads we have to drive on. What are the solutions? Where does AI play a role? I mean, I would give two suggestions of places where I think AI can help. One is better self-management of care. When you look at other industries outside of healthcare, like the banking industry, I think to myself, well, how many of us, when was the last time I went to see a human bank teller? It was a long time ago, right? I don't even remember the last time I went to see a human bank teller. We have ATMs, we have mobile banking, right? We enable the ability to self-manage a lot of the transactions we would otherwise have to use a human for. It doesn't mean that banks don't exist. It doesn't mean that I don't have to interact with people within banks. It's just that my needs, when I do interact with them, are much more complex, right? And similarly, as patients, we want our care, we want our questions resolved as soon as possible. And so how might we leverage the use of AI to better allow self-management of care, but to have the appropriate escalations of care? I mean, what makes KP special is the hard thing to do in healthcare is not to create an AI digital front or an AI front door. It's to build a network of 25,000 doctors with all specialists, 40 hospitals, 600 medical offices. I mean, that's expensive, and it takes 80 years for us to build, right? And so when patients get sick, eventually they want all of that. They don't want an AI chatbot, that gives them empathy. They want actual trained clinicians that can give them care. They want a hospital. They want state-of-the-art technology. And so I think that, an organization like KP is really well-positioned to build some self-management offerings with appropriate guardrails, with appropriate escalation points that allows that self-management of care. And the second point I'll mention is we need to move from a one-to-one model of care where one provider takes care of one patient one at a time. And I know that's sacred in healthcare, but in many other industries, education, we have a one-to-many model of care where one teacher educates 30 students. There are challenges with personalization in that model, but I do think that there are ways of leveraging AI to enable one-to-many care that's real-time, that's not episodic, that's not 15 minutes once a month, but it's really behavioral nudges, throughout your day.
Thank you. I really feel that because this past year I was asked to see 2 more patients in a half day. And so my half day is longer now. So I'm like, my next question is, I hear this all the time. Roxana, I don't need to understand how the AI works. I'll just use it. Like, we don't even understand how anesthesia works. We use it. Do you think we need to understand as clinicians how AI works in order to use it? And I'm going to start with you, Julie.
I think I have a different opinion than a lot of the clinicians I talk to in the VA system.
Great.
So I personally I think the evaluation is the key. I don't need to understand how the model got there, but I do need to understand what it's outputting. I think that there were comments made earlier about assessing for bias, assessing for interpretability and accessibility for usability. And I think that's important in the evaluation. But as for understanding the exact mechanism that the model used to get there, I'm less concerned about that. I have talked to, I think, a lot of my colleagues who I think are, more of the sort of traditional regression model, like we have like the weights and you have like everything in completely explainable terms. And I think that is part of the challenge is getting past that barrier where I think we had this, more, I think, traditional view of completely interpretable models and how do we get these more black box model or these potentially more complicated models into production.
Yeah, I mean, on any given day, if you ask me, I'll tell you we definitely need some level of explainability, and the next day I'll say, nope, it doesn't matter. So I'm not sure I was definitely going to call on you
Yeah, I'll
next.
make a comment on that. So yeah, I see this two prongs here. One that we just heard from Julie is this idea of we want to make sure that our systems that are in place in delivery contexts have been evaluated and that there's an available set of documentation such that you can read about the sensitivity and the specificity of what the system is doing. For example, in a diagnostic context, understand not just how well it does on some sort of general population, but your population, your demographic, and when it was last tested, because these things will drift, to understand the value and the overall accuracy of a system in a context. But secondly, the interpretability and explanation, this gets into a deeper notion about what's the nature of the relationship between these systems and clinicians. My view is that these systems should be designed to be augmenting, to be complementing, not with an I, but with an E. I guess complementing is okay too for physicians. Complementing their abilities, understanding human weak spots, filling them in, continuing to educate so that they're always raising the bar, not just for this patient, but for all patients that the clinician may be seeing, and explaining their well-calibrated inferences, including what they're not confident about. So that's a really important piece of the complementarity, to understand if there's something that the system might be guessing about, but the clinician is sure about, they can mesh their reasoning better.
Can I push back, but also get your insights on something? Do you think clinicians really know on a day-to-day basis how to use their own confidence levels or how to even interpret like sensitivity and specificity and probability? I know we're all taught that, but I just mean like being able to actually integrate like my probability of this disease is this, and the model says the probability is this. Therefore, like, what should I do?
So if you feel there are statistical weaknesses today
Yes,
among clinicians, and you're asserting that's the case, why not make it clear to designers of AI systems that their goal is not just to blather out advice, but to figure out how to better visualize, present, so that they're projecting and communicating useful information that would actually be helpful for decision making.
Well, I was sure you were going to have a good insight on that, and I think that's an excellent insight. We have two Daniels on the, you're both awesome. Daniel from Duke, I just want to see if you have any.
DD.
Yeah, well, I I always share that, in order to drive a car, you don't actually need to know how the car is being made, but the moment that you put or you place your hands on the steering wheel, you need to make sure that you drive it safely and responsibly, right? So I think this is where the 100% of the healthcare practitioners, whether it's clinicians, nurses, or anyone who touches the AI for patients' care, we do need to make sure that they understand what they're using and what is some of the implications that when you actually use such technologies. But I do actually want to say that, though, we actually published a paper with Catherine Lucy's from UCSF, the vice provost from that, and we categorized the clinicians into three big buckets. One is 100%, it has to be consumers, which is the early bucket that I actually mentioned. And the translator and the expert, I think for those two buckets, though, you do actually need to understand some of the languages. And by understanding these languages, do actually allow us to accelerate the translation of technologies into the healthcare the settings are much faster. So I do want to actually also do touch on the two other the buckets of clinicians that we're actually talking about. Yeah.
We had a lot of car analogies. We're having so much fun. I'm now looking at the time and realize. So I want to take one question from the audience. Yeah, go ahead. That's you. Tell us your name and where you're from as well, please.
Hey, I'm Devi. I'm a PhD student working on AI and pediatric brain tumor space. My question is, as the topic says, preparing clinicians for AI-enabled future. One thing that we've been developing in our lab is just, for example, like to give some pre-test is, we have this tool where we take surveillance imaging and then we predict recurrence within 1 year, right? And now we show that it works well on retrospective data set, all is good. Now we're trying to get it within prospective testing and stuff. And a lot of people talked about educating clinicians as to telling them about the biases of the model, what AI should do, what not they should not do. What about the mentality shift, right? We've been trying to talk to clinicians who are willing to use our tool as a research use only tool and seeing its benefits and seeing if it actually ends up changing outcomes, right? And that's where I think we've met with clinicians who are willing to use our tool, and we also met with clinicians who are like a little bit skeptical towards it. So I think there's also a little bit of a mentality shift here, like people willing to use this rather than having a lot of equipments to use it. So just wanted to get your thoughts.
One of my comments on that is it might not come down to convincing individual physicians, but instead doing an all-up analysis, for example, on thresholds. When you see the score, for example, flash for a particular patient in neonatal unit, what should the policy be at the hospital based on a more extensive, deep cost-benefit analysis of what it means to use that information or not, and how to use it? I'm thinking about some work we did many years ago now, many years ago, it was 2009, 2010. We fielded one of the first readmissions prediction systems live at a hospital in Washington, D.C. With experimental, and put up flags like this patient is at high risk for being readmitted within 30 days. Did the same thing for infection, for C. diff risk within 48 hours. And this gets into many of the issues you'll be asking, Roxana, but in some ways, we, as an experiment, this was not best practice, but working with the research arm of the hospital, this is MedStar in Washington, D.C., we put up flags in the patient's chart that said high risk X, but we also, behind the scenes, did analyses at the trade-offs, at the level you put the flag up, and what the policy should be to selectively attend and provide, allocate scarce resources to those particular patients under higher risk and have a plan. That necessarily, the plans wouldn't necessarily be clear or transparent, the ideal optimization based on the AI inference to an individual clinician, but the hospital could execute on a policy.
Yeah.
So I just want a quick clarification on the clock because it's a little confusing and got reset. Are we at time or is this for audience question? Oh, we get more audience questions. The fun continues. All right.
We just started.
I'm
It has to
going
be
to
a
grab someone from the
time.
back. You get a question. You get a question. Yeah. All right.
Hi, my name's Kate Eisenberg. I'm a family physician, and I'm working with a team that's building a clinical decision support tool. So for us, this idea of signaling to clinicians what they're using and safely driving is really important. I'm really interested in the panel's comments on uncertainty signaling, because when I raise that concept as a physician, my colleagues are like, well, if you tell me this isn't certain, I don't trust your tool. And on the other hand, we know it's not certain. So I'm just really interested in your all's take on that.
I would have responded to the colleague, how certain are you? but I want to hear what our panel has to say.
So prior to joining KP, I spent nearly 7 years at the Moore Foundation working actually with a lot of people in the audience on clinical diagnosis. And I feel like clinical diagnosis is really the art of managing uncertainty. I think that's one of the challenges of these generative AI models is that they speak with such confidence. And I think that it kind of tricks our brain. Like, I think there is this human flaw in us where when someone speaks confidently, we believe them to be competent and true. And so you're right. I think we heard in the last panel about flagging when additional context information is needed, stating when it's uncertain. Like, those are the types of things that would actually, as a clinician, give me much greater confidence, is to actually, for these models to say, I don't know, or to flag their own level of uncertainty so I can calibrate my decisions based on that level of uncertainty. I don't know how far we are from that, but to me, that would be very confidence-inducing.
And I'll say we're getting there. I mean, I think back to the 5 to 10 year, Roxana,
Yes.
time frame, it's absolutely essential that our AI models understand their competence and report that competence visually and in other ways as they interact with doing clinical consultation with physicians. But keep in mind that we can't just only focus on this blue-green glob of glowing ball of gas called LLMs. We have a whole array of AI technologies that have been developed over 15, 20 years now, many of which use machine learning, many of which come with well-calibrated uncertainty. When they come up with a flag or a signal, they can report that, and that's part of their evaluation. I think we're going to be getting there with the larger models. I didn't mean to call them a name like a blue-green glob of gas, because they're fabulous and they're powerful, and we're all excited about them right now. But it's still experimental for the tools we have for getting at measures of competence. In certain areas like multiple choice exams, the USMLE exams, and these competency tests, these systems are well calibrated. They'll tell you, I got that right with an 80% chance, and you check all the 80% buckets, and yeah, they get about 0.8 of them correct. So we could, in certain settings, they're well calibrated, but we have to extend that work to other settings. Secondly, I predict that even in the short term, even before we do that generally, when you see a report coming from an LLM and it's talking about a patient, it'll call out pieces of text, for example. This came from the patient's chart. This is what the previous doctor said. Amidst a larger piece of text, you'll see specifics that you can trust are 100% true.
Yeah, so I do also want to mention another point. One of the other experiments that our lab is currently doing is to actually see the vision language foundation model. So for certainties, could you actually train the AI agents to report and to also pinpoint where exactly the AI is actually looking? So I think that's then go back to the explainability and how do we actually visual ground train the AI models to do that? I think that's one. And secondly is that how do you actually, when you train a model, how do you actually make it task specific? And you actually dial down the the temperature so that you actually make it confined, and you could actually train it to be very specific and to be very accurate and with a high certainty. So those are the few different ways that we currently are looking at training the new LLMs agents to actually make it more certain when we actually come to a conclusion. Yeah, so I think that's the other the newer ways of training LLMs. Yeah.
All right, I know you have a burning question, so.
Well, I want to say that it's not in 5 to 10 years. It's yesterday. I'm the clinical AI director of a Mayo Cancer Center. The list of AI products that I have to vet right now, asked by faculties, is overwhelms my team. And it's just smaller than the list of AI products being pushed by already installed softwares within the hospital, from revenue cycle to clinical operations to clinical decision making. So it's already happening. And the second point, I'm not sure that clinicians are the ones that should be supervising these algorithms. Going back to my specialty, which I don't practice anymore, in radiation oncology departments, there is a clinical profession that does a residency that is supposed to provide oversight over algorithms to calculate radiation and communicate with physicians, because these models don't only work when you install them. You need to keep checking them through their life cycle, and physicians are just not going to be doing that.
Ooh, so you're suggesting a new job, someone who's both,
And I think that new job is going to become something that we rely upon in different departments and specialties. I think if you look at the recent code of conduct co-authored with a number of colleagues from the National Academy of Medicine, a number of best practices are pointed out, including best practices around how these systems need to be monitored and by departments, specifically on location, what practices need to be in place when it comes to panels and advisory boards that not just track the specifics of the capabilities, but also what's happening to the culture and the end game of delivery of high quality healthcare.
Yes. Julie, do you have any thoughts? I want to get you into the mix.
Actually, I wanted to think back to, I think, a comment made earlier about human computer interaction. I think that's actually really important too, because I think just in this panel we talked about, I don't know if clinicians are actually that great at interpreting uncertainty in our own practice, like interpreting risk, interpreting probability. My background is in lung cancer screening, and so we actually, we have like a decade of shared decision-making tools of trying to explain risks of lung cancer and risks of, a biopsy or a complication. And I'm not entirely sure if we're getting the message across. So I think that there's going to be a rich opportunity here to really think about, as we're building, better measures of uncertainty into these models, how do we present it to clinicians in an effective manner that actually works with their workflow, and how do we present it to our patients as well?
Thank you for that. Unfortunately, I could talk to this panel all day, but we're out of time. So thank you so much, and give a round of applause for our wonderful panelists.